All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It is another week. It is another Tuesday. So we are here. It used to be Tuesday Tao and Wednesday Wisdom, but we finished our books in those series, which was Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. And we've been going back to that recently, I think last time, which is a playlist on the channel if you want to check that out. Last time we looked at the second verse of the Tao Te Ching. Living without judgment and in perfect oneness is what Lao Tzu invites his readers to do. The Tao Te Ching, coming from 25 centuries ago, accomplish much by trying less. Effort is one piece of the whole. Another piece of the whole, of course, which we don't often consider, is non-effort. Fuse these dichotomies, separates, and the result is incredible. The result is effortless action without an attachment to an outcome. And that is powerful. That alone could change many of our lives. And then on Wednesdays, we used to look at the wisdom of the ages from Dr. Wayne W. Dyer, who was obviously a very profound influence. This one on patience, coming to us from Confucius. Confucius was a Chinese teacher and philosopher whose philosophies strongly influenced Chinese life and culture for over 2,000 years. He lived 551 BC to 479 BC. Do not be desirous of having things done quickly. Do not look at small advantages. Desire to have things done quickly prevents their being done thoroughly. Looking at small advantages prevents great affairs from being accomplished. I did not know those two things that I would reference from Tuesday Tao and Wednesday Wisdom of the past would be so oddly connected and similar. Maybe that was a lesson for somebody or myself today. We are going to be diving into the dimensions of time, ladies and gentlemen. I had some great comments last week when we did our previous update on Mysteries of the Unexplained. I think one of them, we'll go check them out at some point, but one of them was, in this video, Chase attempts to read a book, or something like that. I attempt to read while, yeah, it was very funny. Good. And then another guy was upset that he wasted his time watching this video. And I always find that fascinating that someone would spend their time watching a video and then be upset. I'm like, listen, there's nobody forcing anybody to watch any videos. So if there's any kind of content that you take in across the entire internet, I mean, this is long form YouTube here, so like coming across this and spending time and then being, I'm like, it's a lot easier to waste your time other places than here on my videos. So I'm very surprised. But some people we have to give empathy to because they're in a rough place and they would like to spend their time negatively. And you know what I mean? It's like if someone is in a position to where they take time out of their life to try to be negative to somebody else, that means we need to have empathy towards them and recognize that they are in a place bad enough that they would actually waste their time to be negative to somebody else. Sorry. But, since we're on that, no, we got to do the dimensions of time. We've been random so far in this video, and I don't know what to expect, but that's the purpose. It's all fun. Let us dive in to the dimensions of time, ladies and gentlemen, coming to us from the Mysteries of the Unexplained. That time has many dimensions is a concept often advanced to account for prophecy. The gist of the idea is that time which seems to unfold in a linear way, with the past coming before the present and the present before the future, might, in another dimension, not be experienced sequentially. The past, the present, and future could exist simultaneously, all at once. And that makes me think of a friend in the past or a coworker. We were talking about past life regression hypnosis and gaining information from your past lives, or how that could account for your current, soul age, possibly, or subconscious knowledge, maybe your morals, your personal preferences, all of these things that, it's some people will say, well, they're a young soul and this person's a really old soul. And so the idea was brought up that what if time isn't linear as we think of it, and we know that, and it is actually this cyclical thing that's all kind of at once, and we just see it from a separate perspective, from duality, and from our physical reality perspective, rather than zooming out of that and seeing it all as one. What if not only our past lives influencing our current lives, but what if future lives are also happening simultaneously right now, that are also influencing past lives? I had to give him credit, because there really wasn't a way that I could say that this didn't make sense. Because if we're going to consider that this concept of time, the past, the present, and the future, and past lives, and future lives, and even our present life, time, is all existing simultaneously when you zoom out of this human concept, this physical concept of time. I don't know. Fascinating. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Or if you feel like I'm wasting your time. If you do feel that already, please don't waste any of your time. Time is important. Attention and time, I say this in most videos recently, are the most important, valuable asset that we have to spend. Our attention and our time. I think time should be above attention there a little bit. But same thing. So if you're, please don't waste your time or attention, ladies and gentlemen. This is for fun, and I like to ramble on interesting topics that I find interesting, as well as spiritual philosophy, so that through this, we can hopefully seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment. Enlightenment to me means a greater awareness and understanding of ourselves and the nature of reality and psychology and spirituality and all of this, including today in the Mysteries of the Unexplained, reading for purposes of teaching and commentary and expanding the mind, dimensions of time. The concept that there are unfamiliar dimensions of time is most easily approached by way of those dimensions with which we are already familiar. Those of length, height, breadth. These in turn are best approached quite literally from a starting point which, geometrically speaking, has a location but no dimensions. It does, however, relate to figures with dimensions in the following way. If a point is moved through space, it marks a line with the one dimension of length. If a line is moved through space, it traces the figure of a plane with two dimensions of length and breadth. This is an older book, so maybe it means width. Or maybe breadth and width are different. However, length, width, and if a plane is moved in space, it traces a figure with the three dimensions of length, breadth, and height. We can also work backward from a three-dimensional body and find that the cross-section of the three-dimensional cube is a two-dimensional plane. That cross-section of the plane is one-dimensional line, and that the cross-section of the line is simply a dimensionless point. Now, this is profound, yet so simple. That's why I love this, because if you're not a deep thinker, then you would be like, what the hell? This is the stupidest and simplest thing I've ever heard anybody talking about. Talking about lines and points and squares and space. But see, if you like to think spiritually and philosophically and metaphysically, then this is meaning something far greater to you. From this, we can infer, I think there's a typo in the book here. It says, for this, we can infer that a kitten attack was incoming. And we knew, somebody also commented and said, Beans is a good pupil. That was hilarious. I appreciate you. She's definitely a good pupil. Are you a student of philosophy, Beans? Do you like philosophy? Well, she certainly likes being the center of attention. But that's fine. So, from this, we can infer that a body of 3 dimensions is the cross section of a body of 4. And that a 3-dimensional body, when moved in a certain way, will produce a body of 4 dimensions. Then comes the question, of course, how do we see this? How can we see this body of 4 dimensions from our plane of 3? I don't know. Are we in the 4th dimension? This makes me think of the guys that are like, we got to get to the 26th dimension to ascend to light bodies. And, I don't know if that's could be as right as anything else, I think. I'm not sure. Keep your mind open, ladies and gentlemen, but don't let it fall out onto the sidewalk. I think that happens sometimes. But this idea that we can work backward from a 3-dimensional body to find the cross-section of the 2-dimensional, and then from the 2-dimensional plane, we can work backwards to find the 1-dimensional line, and then work backwards to find the point from which the line began. From this same work, we can infer that a body of 3 dimensions goes beyond once it is moved into the cross-section of a body of 4 dimensions. Going beyond the 3rd dimension of time, ladies and gentlemen. And that when moved in a certain way, this 3-dimensional body will produce a body of 4 dimensions. Then comes the question of what sort of body could a 3-dimensional shape be the cross-section of? Once again, the question I asked, what would this 4-dimensional shape look like? Are you cleaning yourself? So, in what sort of new direction, is the question, could a 3-dimensional shape be moved to produce one of 4 dimensions? Since a movement other than up, down, forward, and backward, or side to side, would simply produce a larger figure, not one of a different dimension. I have a feeling somebody's already got the answer to this. If you've got it, timestamp it and put it in the comments below, because it's these lines of thought that cause something to go aha for somebody. The answer, of course, is the feature duration. For as soon as something ceases to endure, it ceases to exist. To the 3 familiar dimensions, then, we should add duration in time as a 4th dimension. Interesting. See, I just thought that's odd, though, because they hadn't included time previously in the first 3, and then they're like, all right, we need a 4th. Aha, let's add time now. So I don't know if they're onto something there or not, but let us continue. Nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today, Beans. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. I sincerely hope that you're getting value. Now, what sort of body could produce a four-dimensional shape? They're like, well, then we should add duration and time as a fourth dimension. Ordinary three-dimensional bodies should therefore be properly described as four-dimensional already, because they are in time, is what I think it's getting at. However, and a body with three dimensions must be defined as having only length, breadth, and height, but no duration. Is there anything that exists that has no duration at all? That would be something that exists for only an instant, less than 1/millionth of a second? I don't know. Once again, this is just food for thought. Ponderation. Remember, to attain true knowledge of the nature of reality through a pure philosophy and a spiritual striving, we must continue a constant contemplation to attain this knowledge. That is the wisdom and the philosophy that was taught to us from thousands of years ago from the Egyptian sage god Thoth, the god of wisdom. Now, also known as Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice greatest. 3 times the greatest, ladies and gentlemen. But when it comes to three dimensions, it is but only hypothetically, for in fact, the point, the line, and plane do not truly exist as such. Any line that can be seen has breadth as well as length and duration, just as any physical plane has a certain thickness as well as length and width. What movement, then, must a figure of 3 dimensions undergo to produce a body of 4 dimensions? We moved a plane in the dimension of height to produce a cube. So the movement of a hypothetical cube in the dimension of time should produce a real figure of 4 dimensions. What does movement in the dimension of time mean? Comes that question, because I've seen the cube just sitting there stationary, and then like a fast forward of a time lapse of seeing whatever happens to it. It's like, oh, somebody picked it up, set it over here. Somebody played with it. It fell off the table. It has done all of these movements in the duration of time. So the fourth dimension of the cube from this is this. Crazy everywhere. I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. This is just what I'm getting from what we're reading here about the dimensions of time. And we're having fun, okay? Having fun. What does movement in the dimension of time mean, ladies and gentlemen? Seriously now, like, what does it mean to move through time? As we said, it must mean movement in a new direction, not up, not down, not sideways. Are there any other kinds of movement? For a start, there is the movement that the Earth's rotation imparts to everything upon it, considering you still see reality from that perspective. Once again, we're open to all philosophies. So you could say the Earth's rotation on a flat plane. This is all funny, ladies and gentlemen. Now, seriously though, this is just them, you know, giving ideas, theorizing here. For a start, the movement, the rotation imparts to everything upon it and puts it even apparently motionless. Ah, so as the cube is sitting motionless on the table, even if nobody ever picks it up and moves it around, there is still some sort of motion, regardless of whether you think we are on a plane, in a realm, or on a planet. There is some sort of motion outside of the stationary, seemingly stationary position of the three-dimensional object. Is this in question creating a fourth dimension? That's where we're going with this, I believe. And so we can thus say it, the three-dimensional body is hypothetically motionless, and this is the hypothetically motionless cross-section of a real body whose fourth dimension, duration, is inseparable from the motion that the turning or movement of the realm inevitably imparts to everything. To everything. That's profound. That also makes me wonder, since we're joking about the flat earth stuff. I mean, there's a lot of theories out there, so don't just, you have to be willing to hold two contradicting ideas in your mind at the same time. If you can't, you're never going to get anywhere. You'll just be stuck on one thing all the time, and you'll never advance in your thoughts. You'll be like, no, it just has to be real. But this ride, its thrills and chills and funny colors, goes ups and downs. But we've been on this ride such a long time that we tend to think that it's real. We have our furrows of worry and our bank accounts and our money and all of these things. It's just got to be real. And there are people that sometimes come back to us and try to remind us and tell us, hey, lighten up, calm down. This is just a ride. And usually we send those people away and tell them they're crazy because we don't want to be wrong. We don't want to realize that we've been taking this too seriously. And it is just supposed to be enjoyed. Where that came from, I don't know. I love a good Bill Hicks quote. Shout out to the great comedian. However, the great philosopher comedian. But what kind of movement would we have to undergo as a three-dimensional form to produce a body of a fourth dimension? And this fourth dimension possibly being duration and time. The dimensions of time. And so, furthermore, the inevitable motions that are that of the earth. Oh yeah, I think I was going to say, I wonder if the people that think the earth is flat still see it as spinning like a, like a CD would, like a disc would. It's just not a ball spinning, but it's a flat spinning disc. I'm not sure about that. Actually, there's probably people that would argue both sides of that too. So then we'd have to hold those two opposing ideas at the same time. And say, even if there isn't a flat earth, I still hold the possibility. And secondly, if there is, which we're open to that not being the case, but if there is, then there's also the possibility that it is or isn't spinning like a disc. And then that would mean one thing or the other. And you could see how we could eventually get somewhere, going down either rabbit hole. However, with that being said, coming back to four dimensions, coming from three dimensions, we can thus say that a three-dimensional body is hypothetically motionless, and it is a cross-section of a real body whose fourth dimension comes from duration and is inseparable from the motion that the turning world realm inevitably imparts to everything. Further inevitable motions are that of the earth around the sun, and of the sun around the center of the galaxy, and perhaps of the galaxy itself around some unknown point. This must be a very old book. Oh, very fun, ladies and gentlemen. Very fun. Once again, thank you so much for being here, and I sincerely hope you're getting value. Now, since any perceptible body is, in fact, undergoing all of these motions simultaneously, so if we look at the sun like flying through space, then behind it we have this heliocentric circle going on of all the planets following behind the sun as it's going through space. If space even exists. There's a lot to consider here in reality with all the different interesting and compelling theories that there are. I mean, the most interesting one that I've heard so far is that the Wild West never even happened, and that was staged. And they sold us all of this. I mean, that one's really fun to think about because you're like, man, that would imply that there's so much that we just don't know, ladies and gentlemen. The implications, I'm telling you. One day I do want to do a dedicated series to like the most wild and out there, interesting and compelling theories that I've heard that most people would call by a different name. Because it's fun just to think about these things as possibilities. Like, whoa, what would that mean for us? Anyways, since any perceptible body is in fact undergoing all these motions simultaneously, so us circling behind the sun, or whatever way you see that, and then this whole thing going on within the galaxy, and then the galaxy is doing its thing. This is a lot of movement. This is a lot of duration in time. And going back to the point, if moved in one direction creates a line, and then if we move the line in another direction, it creates a plane. And if we move a plane in another direction, it creates a square or a three-dimensional object. Then if this object moves, but not up or down or back and forth and left and right, but if this object moves in a much deeper way, but moves by the movement of the realm and of the solar system and the galaxy and the universe, how could we account for all that movement? And what new shape, what new fourth dimension could we find? Since any perceptible body is in fact undergoing all of these motions simultaneously, we can say that everything has these dimensions, though in a way that is ordinarily imperceptible. In other words, we cannot see this because motions and the dimensions that they imply are only perceptible in a framework of time, and they can be referred to as dimensions of time. If duration is one aspect of time, ladies and gentlemen, then what might the others be? Once again, we're talking about the dimension and the dimensions of time coming to us from Mysteries of the Unexplained. Only duration is perceptible. It's like, if duration is one aspect of time, what could the others be? Among several possibilities, we can suggest appearance and disappearance, change and reoccurrence of all possibilities, but only duration is perceptible. When we say that something appears, we mean that we suddenly note its existence. When something disappears, we note its lack of existence. We perceive no intermediate condition of appearing or disappearing. In the same way, we talk of change, but actually only develop the concept as we perceive aggregates of characteristics that exist or cease to exist. And so we infer, but do not actually observe, once again, in metaphor to the appearance or disappearance. It's when we note it. So we're not actually observing the process of appearance. The same goes. Very interesting. This is deep, ladies and gentlemen. When we say that something appears, we mean that we suddenly note it. But change is similar, and so we infer, but do not observe, that the reoccurrence of a sunset and sunrise, the passage of seasons, and the growth of a child. And yet things really do appear and disappear, change and reoccur, although not actually perceived to do so. They are, so to speak, hypothetical to us and must have their reality in an entirely different dimension of time, possibly other dimensions of time. Just as the hypothetical three-dimensional body becomes real, that is, perceptible in the dimension of time, we call it duration. If access to higher dimensions of time belongs to one body, it is at least theoretically possible that it belongs, though invisibly, to all bodies. We can further assume that such access is by way of unfamiliar modes or higher levels of consciousness. Remember, this goes back to everything we've been talking about in this series, Beyond the Walls of Time, talking of prophecy, anomalies, coincidences, weird synchronicities. I bet a lot of us have been noticing a lot of synchronicities lately. It is that time, ladies and gentlemen. It's that time again. But once again, just like we've learned about prophecy and premonitions, seeing of the future, this comes from connecting to something, some form of information from a field, Akashic field perhaps, through usually higher or altered states of consciousness, beyond our ordinary waking state of consciousness. And the same can be said here. If access to a higher dimension of time belongs to one body, it is at least theoretically possible that it belongs through invisibly to all bodies. And we can further assume that such access to a higher dimension of time belongs and is by way of unfamiliar modes or levels of consciousness. And that, the name we give to one of these levels of consciousness that goes beyond our contemporary dimension of time, we can call prophecy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a thorough breakdown of the dimensions of time. The dimensions of time, ladies and gentlemen, amazing. Amazing. There's much more to look at here. Unconscious premonitions, a date with destiny, double vision, even seeing in a crystal ball. The psychic Joseph de Luis used a crystal ball to see into the future. He focuses on the shiny surface until it becomes misty, and in the cloud-like shapes that form over the crystal, he can perceive what is filtering through his senses. This is a great subject of debate. And I think it goes back to everything we've discussed on these out of the ordinary states of consciousness, whether it be the Oracle of Delphi, known as the Pythoness, chewing her laurel leaves and smelling of the fumes in the caves, or whether it be different modes and methods from mystics and psychics and seers of all types. For now, we'll leave our questions to our ponderation and consideration and continued contemplation. A pure philosophy is a spiritual striving through a constant contemplation to attain true knowledge of, simply put, the things that are. The universe, reality, ourselves, psychology, philosophy, and even our spirituality, ladies and gentlemen. Next week in this series, if we continue in Mysteries of the Unexplained, we'll be looking at cognition of the future. Attempts to explain prophecy must make suppositions about the future. And the most fundamental supposition is that events in the future do not exist and cannot, therefore, produce effects in the present. The path of explanation that stems from this view leads of necessity to various ideas of the future as a potential that somehow exists right now, simultaneously, here in the present, ladies and gentlemen. And that is what today started with. Could, in fact, the future, the past, and the present all be happening simultaneously at once? It would seem to us from our physical perspective, our physical dual, separate perspective, seeing things as not oneness, but as a bunch of separate things, that we could seem to get a certain perspective on that. But anyways, we'll leave it there for today, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I love and appreciate each and every one of you that spends time here with me and all the wonderful authors and poets and mystics and philosophers and sages of the ages, ladies and gentlemen. I really, really, truly do appreciate that you would spend your time and attention here, and it means a lot to me. And so thank you very much. Remember to seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through a greater awareness and understanding of the nature of reality, so that through that awareness you can create the ability within yourself to bring happiness to life. Let me say that again. I don't know if I did that right. Seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through a greater awareness and understanding of the nature of reality, so that through that awareness we can hopefully create a greater quality of life. Remember to seek to discover the mysteries of our history and the lost wisdom of the ages, as well as remember that there is no way to happiness, because happiness is the way. It is what we must bring to life. And when we can create the ability within ourselves to bring happiness to life, to our moments, because our moments make up our days and our weeks and our lives. And so our lives are made up of moments. So if we can create higher quality moments and stack those up, then all those things we've been telling ourselves, oh, when I get this much and have that and I'm this, then I'll finally be happy, that becomes irrelevant, because then we are there. And then hopefully from that point, the entire journey is wonderful. Hopefully, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I love and appreciate each and every one of you. Once again, it means a lot to me that you would spend your time and attention here. So hopefully I've entertained or added some kind of educational value to your life. If you'd like, expand the description below. You can get this book for yourself to put it on your shelf so you can follow along in the future, as well as a link to C60 Power, the ultimate antioxidant known to man. Optimizes mitochondrial function, supports immune response, increased energy, recovery, helps with memory, skin vitality. I mean, this is crazy, ladies and gentlemen. This, if you've never heard of it, definitely search it up. Buckminster Fuller is responsible. With that being said, a link to my Etsy shop as well if you'd like some landscape paintings. So you can get the book and give yourself the gift of health and find some art as well. I don't know. it helps support the work I do here. So if you appreciate what I do and you'd like to support my continued effort on this channel, then thank you so much. I love and appreciate each and every one of you. Until the next time, ladies and gentlemen, be the change that you want to see. Be the example that you want to set. Thank you.